In this combined episode of Motive Garage and Motive Tech, I'm going to prove to all those people out there once again that you need adjustable cam gears in your RB26. So back when I first started development on my R32 GT-R, I showed that adjustable cam gears were very important in an RB26, even with stock camshafts. They add more mid-range power without losing top-end power and make for a faster, better driving car, and they most definitely work. However, recently, a bunch of people online and around the world are trying to say you don't need adjustable cam gears in your RB26 with stock camshafts or even drop-in camshafts. So I'm here to prove once again that they do work. Now we have Herman from PRP's R33 GT-R N1 that you saw in the first build episode of getting this car back on the road again. And the plan is we're going to do 3 baseline dyno runs to get an average power level for the car. We're then going to adjust the cam gears, which are PRP, adjustable cam gears, 2 degrees advance on the inlet at a time, 2 degrees retard on the exhaust at a time. We already know that going the other way doesn't really do anything. We're going to do that, see the power difference, see the power curve difference, and then we're going to install some Kelford Drop-In Camshafts into the car, run them at 0, and then do the adjustable cam gears with the camshafts. Now, obviously, to do this with a car, you need to have an aftermarket ECU. We've got the M-Tron in this car, so we can make all the adjustments as we go. The modifications to this are very basic. It just has a full exhaust system and the M-Tron ECU and adjustable cam gears. The turbos are N1 steel-wheeled turbos, but a stock fuel system is stock, intercooler is stock, and a lot of it is still pretty stock. So yeah, perfect car to test it on to prove that they're worth putting onto any RB26 in any modification level. Let's go. So some of you watching those first dyno runs are probably saying, why is the front of the car jacked up? There's power going on the front wheels are spinning. You're not doing it properly. There's something wrong, and you're already in the comments section telling us that we're wrong and we didn't do it right. So let me explain. The R33 Skyline GT-R's 4-wheel drive system allows you to unplug a fuse and you just have complete rear-wheel drive. So you don't have to do anything other than pull the fuse out when you put it on a rear-wheel drive hub or chassis dyno. Now, an R33 and R34 GT-R, they have residual transfer case pressure. What does that mean? Well, what they decided to do to make the 4-wheel drive system work faster, it has a little bit of pressure, preload, if you will, on the transfer case. So what that means is, on an R33 and R34 GT-R, you have to remove the front shaft out of the car to dyno it. Now, if you forget, don't have time, or for whatever other reasons you need to do it in a hurry, you can just jack the front of the car up like this, and the car isn't transferring more torque to the front, even though it looks like it. It's just residual pressure causing those front wheels to spin. It's not putting a lot of power to the front, but the weight of the wheel and tyre is obviously going to sap a little bit of power. And in the case of this car, it's probably sapped about 15 horsepower of the reading. Is it causing any issues to us tuning the car? No. For the purpose of doing a before and after, does it make any difference? No. Is it hurting the car? No. Do you need to comment in the comment section to tell us anything? No. But once again, you need to remove the front shaft in one of these or a 34 GT-R because of the residual transfer case pressure, or jack up the front like this and you can safely tune the car. So we advanced the inlet 2 degrees, retarded the exhaust 2 degrees, as we know that's the direction we want to go, and we want to do it in 2-degree increments. Now once you do that, you have to reset the ignition timing, because obviously it's going to be changed by 2 degrees. Now with a coil on plug ignition system, we have to basically pull one out, put a lead on so we can get a timing light on it, get it back to 20 degrees where it was set before, and then we can run it again. Let's go.
I think we'll try another 2 on the intake because I think that'll work.
Look, my experience, having done this more than once, is that 2 degrees on the exhaust is pretty much bang on for either a stock or a drop-in camshaft. I think there's more to go on the inlet though. We can sit here all day trying 1 degree at a time, or I can just say to you, go to 4 degrees advance.
Go to 4 degrees advance.
when adjusting cam gears to get the optimum setup, you've got a choice. You can just go for top end, you can go for mid-range, or try and get a balance of both. So at 2 degrees, we had the most amount of power, 317. Then we went to 4 degrees, we lost, what, 1.5 horsepower up top, but we actually picked up 5 horsepower through a mid-range section of probably a few thousand RPM. So do you want the 5 horsepower more mid-range, or do you want the 1.5 up top?
Or do you try and compromise?
Or do you try and compromise? So now we're going to go back to 3 degrees and see if that gives us both. So going back to 3 degrees advanced did exactly what I hoped it would do, and that is we kept our 317 peak horsepower from the 2 degrees advanced, but we actually kept, in fact we increased our mid-range from when we had it on 4 degrees just a little bit. So now we've got the best of both worlds by having 3 degrees advance on the inlet combined with 2 degrees retard on the exhaust. And all we've got left to do now is we'll try a little bit more on the exhaust so that we get the perfect combination for this car. As we said earlier, 2 and 2 would probably work on everything, but if you want to actually get the most out of it, there is a little bit of tuning time required, but let's face it, there's a lot harder things to do on a dyno than just cam gears, right?
And it's funny, we were about to go, you know what, should we bother with pulling it back 1 degree? Yeah. It's 1 degree.
But it worked.
It picked up another 5-6 horsepower.
That's obviously its happy spot, and whenever you adjust cam gears, you always end up going kind of past that point, and then you're going to come back to it, right? That's the nature of it. So. And now in the same way that we advanced the inlet too far and came back, essentially that's what's happened on the exhaust now. We went to 4 degrees and it's just a little bit too far because we lost a tiny bit up top, but then we also lost right down the bottom, and basically most of the top end we've lost a couple of horsepower, but we didn't really gain any mid-range, maybe 1 horsepower or 2 horsepower for about 1,000 RPM. So overall, in the total area under the curve, that is just not worth it. So now we're going to bring the exhaust back to 2 degrees retard and just double check that that's the optimum spot. So it's 20 horsepower peak. But the most important thing is there is between 10 and 33 horsepower difference through the mid-range. So the most amount of gain we saw was 33 horsepower. And I can tell you right now, that's more than 10% on this car. You will notice that. So as I said many times over, you don't just pick up peak power with these, you pick up mid-range, bottom end, you pick up everywhere. And that's all for cam gears, and torque 50 newton meters.
Well, that's it. We've got 50 newtons of torque in the middle.
Yep.
From like 334 to 383 newton meters of torque.
That's huge.
Huge. We picked up 20 horsepower at the top and 33 in the mid-range.
The torque is what you're going to feel the most when you drive it through the mid-range. So I guess the final result is they work. The end.
The end. The end. But I wonder if putting bigger cams in will help.
That's a good idea. Why don't we try installing some Kelford camshafts now? It's 264 degree duration. So that's a pretty good drop-in cam. Doesn't require a valve spring.
Yep.
Let's put them in at 0 and do the same thing.
And start again.
Start again.
I'll go get some cams now.
So the other thing I like arguing about is that drop-in camshafts, some people say you have to change your shims and all this sort of stuff. Well, if they're a drop-in, they're supposed to drop in. Now, if your shim clearances are out when you put drop-in camshafts in, what does that mean? Well, they were out beforehand.
Still going to be out.
They were already out. So the drop-in camshaft is not what's causing your clearance to be out if they're an actual drop-in. It's just the fact that your engine's worn and probably doing it. Now, people don't realise is that the valve seat wears, the shim clearance gets tighter, not looser. Of course. It getting looser would have to wear the camshaft itself to do that, right? So
you're more likely to wear a seat than a cam.
Exactly right. So obviously you're not stupid. You went and checked the shim clearance on this one. You ended up with not too bad, maybe slightly tight.
Slightly tight, 0.4 on the intake.
And it's 0.45 is factory recommendation.
So a little bit tight, and on the exhaust I was 0.3 and a little bit over.
And it's 0.38 factory. So we're a little bit tighter, which is means we're not going to lose any power.
Sounds good.
And it sounds healthy.
Yeah.
It's not going to cause any issues at that.
With the Tomei, you can get away with a bit more clearance because they've got quite a large ramp into the lobe.
Yep.
And it quietens it down. But Kelford's done an amazing job of these. I'm really impressed.
This is quieter than before.
Yeah, it does.
So we fixed one issue. So now we've got better clearances by putting a drop-in camshaft in. We checked them, so the internet can calm down a little bit. But yeah, that's good. So always check the clearances, but you don't necessarily have to change your shims when you put a drop-in in, but always check them.
And you can do it on the dyno in 2 hours.
So my predictions with the camshafts is that when they were at 0, we would lose bottom end and mid-range, but we would pick up a little bit of top end. And you can see on the graph here that it has lost mid-range and bottom end, and then you can see up top it starts to get into its stride, but the issue we have is that it starts to lean out. If you make more torque or you make more power, obviously related to each other, you need more fuel.
More fuel.
So if it starts to lean out, what does that tell you?
Making more power.
So we then tried to add more fuel, but guess what?
We're out of
injector.
We're out of injector.
So if we can't add the fuel, we can't tune it properly. So we have to basically upgrade the fuel system to keep going, and look what Herman has. It's time to install aftermarket injectors and PRP fuel rail. It already has we're going to do a pump.
Well, luckily we brought a PRP fuel rail kit with everything, so we'll quickly slap that in and a Turbo Smart reg and
go from there.
Going, yeah.
But what you can see here is you have to remember the new camshaft, we haven't adjusted it yet. And when I did this 12 years ago with Type B pond cams, the exact same thing happened. I put the aftermarket camshaft in, I lost a bunch of bottom end and mid-range, but the cam gear adjustments from the adjustable cam gears that we now know work, well, I always knew, I actually then got back the mid-range and bottom end, and that's all we're trying to do. With an aftermarket camshaft, if you can not lose mid-range and pick up top, that's the perfect scenario, right?
We didn't even get to dialing cams because we're out of fuel.
We're out of fuel. So we've got to get the fuel system sorted first, then we can dial it in, and then we can give you some proper results. But at least they did exactly what we thought we'd do.
Yep. I'd say we went into a knock map there because it started pulling time out. We lost our top end.
Yeah, so it still made more, but you could see it was about to do its thing, but it nosed over and sort of...
Mind you, we're still at 14 PSI.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't even put boost in it yet, so...
So let's keep going.
Let's keep going. So camshafts are in. Obviously we had to adjust the tune to suit. Now the first thing that happened is exactly as I predicted, which was a more efficient engine on the same amount of turbo flow will actually have a lower boost level. So it actually had 318, so only a horsepower more than it did before, but it actually did it on nearly 2 pound less boost. So for this video, we want the boost to match. Now, if you don't know how boost works, if the engine becomes more efficient, the same amount of flow will actually be less boost pressure, because boost pressure is a byproduct of how much air the turbos flow versus how much air the engine consumes. So I knew that we would make the same power on less boost, but we want the same boost. So we just upped the boost to match 14 pound up top, and it's jumped to 343 horsepower. So what's that? That's like 27 horsepower more
Yes.
on the same boost.
I'll explain air fuel ratio. So before we were running, the blue line was flat 13s. It was too lean, so we had to get out of it.
Which gave it a bit more power.
Of course, it's always going to give it power running lean, right? But things start to heat up. So what we ended up doing is giving it a ratio of 12. We're still making it on the top end, so now
Cam gears.
we can try and catch that with some cam gear.
So now we're going to use
basically
we're going to use the cam gears now to try and match the bottom end and mid range. And as I said, if you can put a camshaft in and not lose bottom end or mid range, but pick up top, that's the perfect scenario, right? Like we're not losing anything.
You can see it, like it wants to keep pulling now. And before, we were out of cam there.
Yeah, wonderful.
And it was already lean, so that was it. We pushed it to the nth degree before.
Yep.
Now it wants to keep taking timing and boost.
So we picked up 46 horsepower from 0 degree camshaft stock to 0 degree Kelfords.
Yes.
So just the camshaft was 46 horsepower on a car that basically just has an exhaust and an ECU. So I don't think we've really lost a whole lot of bottom end and mid range versus a zeroed factory camshaft.
No, that's exactly.
We've only lost bottom end and mid range versus a factory camshaft that's had the cam timing done.
I wouldn't mind just doing the intake first because it's easier. We'll dial the intake and then we'll bring in the exhaust. Then we'll bring it up with the first run before we started playing with cam timing and just see where we ended up.
I reckon we can get to the point where we haven't lost any bottom end or mid range and we still have the extra power.
And we know that playing with cams on the cam gear, playing with the exhaust isn't really affecting our intake.
Yeah.
So let's get the intake done and dialed, and then we'll leave that alone, and then we might play with the exhaust and see where we end up.
Results all on the same boost. We came in with 297 horsepower, which is the green line here, and you can see that we went to 317 with adjustable cam gear. So we already picked up 20 horsepower, 33 horsepower in the mid range. Then we installed the Kelford camshafts, 264, which is, decent increase with our 8.95mm lift, and we've now gone to 354 horsepower. That's nearly, what's that? From 317 up to 354 is nearly 40 horsepower increase up top. But the best part is we haven't lost any bottom end or mid range at all.
Correct.
Which is a perfect scenario, right? Way more top end, no loss of mid range at all. But if you compare someone that came in with a stock car and now has cams and cam gears,
297 to 354.
Total increase is nearly 60 horsepower.
60 horsepower almost.
And we're safer than before, and we haven't even let the car cool down at all. So if we wanted to, we could probably cool the car down if we wanted to more, let the heat soak out of it, and we could probably make closer to 360 if we really wanted to.
Before, on the 297, it wasn't really responding to boost.
Yeah.
Because it was nosing over so hard, the cams wouldn't let it rev. So now that we've got our 60 almost horsepower, we're happy with our cam timing.
Let's put some boost in it.
Why don't we give it some boost and see what it'll take?
I reckon that front prop shaft needs to come out tonight too.
at 12:15.
Thanks to M-Tron,
Big thanks to Emtron, Kelford, and obviously PRB.
and Brent, our old tutor from NB Dyno.
We've been doing this for over 2 decades, and we're still excited at midnight on a Friday night, sitting around, mucking around with pretty much
A standard
the most
engine.
basic car with a standard engine.
This is more fun than making 1500 horsepower.
I don't know about that. Maybe more than 1400.
It's a standard engine with standard turbos.
Standard turbo, standard manifolds, so much standard stuff in there. So yeah, that's super impressive. Hey!
There is power in that.
There is.
Yeah. So that's why I'm doing it.
We've changed tuners. Adam Cirillo's taken over. How we got to this point, I'm really not sure. I believe the conversation earlier went, did you know Adam's building this crazy R33? Oh, he's a mad dog, invite him over. And he's like, oh, I'm meant to be drag racing tomorrow, I'm loading a car, but I'll come down for a quick visit. Quick visit.
Quick visit. How many hours later? And how many drinks?
That's enough.
That's what happens when Adam Cirillo gets on a laptop.